grand plans to do much, much more in the next few years. So I pulled our membership. We have 8,532 individual members right here in the MSA. I pulled the top 5 wealthiest zip codes to give you a feel for that segment, and there's almost 400 members that are in a zip code where their average home price is over $1 million. We have 125 bike shops or bicycle suppliers in the area, and our direct job impact is 721. So that's just full-time employees and just directly in the bike space, not counting tourism, not counting part-time, not counting big box stores that sell a lot of bikes as well too. Directly, our annual retail sales are $120 million. So whenever we go into a community, we like to talk about how many people we employ and how much our direct sales are in the bicycle space, because this community would generate a tremendous amount of revenue and economic development through bicycling and through the bike industry. And exciting news, Bike Share is coming to San Diego. This summer, Deco Bikes is bringing in about 1,700 bicycles in 175 different stations. So, but we're seeing bike sharing transforming America, really. And when it goes into a community, it's very visible, and there's it's usually a very popular thing that really transforms the city. So we're excited to see Bike Share coming to San Diego this summer. So I'm going to just briefly touch on 3 quick trends, and some of my trends you've heard from Charlie as well. 3 quick trends, and then we're going to tell you about one poll, and then that's pretty much my report today. But the first trend is basically on how people move around. A second trend is cities, mayors, and bike share. A third is broad-based coalitions. You're seeing a lot of unusual coalitions across America. And finally, I want to tell you about a poll that we did in New York recently and the results of that poll in terms of bicycling and bike share's popularity. So first off, bicycling in cities is surging. We're seeing an incredible amount of popularity in biking to work and for short trips. Of America's 100 most populated cities, in 99 out of 100 of those most populated cities, car trips have actually gone down. And in 85 of those cities, bicycling has gone up. We're certainly not an anti-car organization. It's just showing you that people's patterns are changing. How they move around their city, how they move around their region is different. And we're seeing ridership up on bicycle commuting. 6 years ago, only 1 city in America had bike sharing, and that's Washington, D.C. How many of you are from Washington? But there's a couple at least? Wow, I think there'd be a lot more than that. I'm not sure how many people have been to Washington, D.C. Okay, low bar here. So Washington, 6 years ago, there was only 1 city in America that had bike sharing, and that was Washington. And now, by the end of 2014, 91 cities in America will have bike sharing. It's really a huge trend that in just 6 short years is sweeping the nation. A couple of weeks ago, I was at a U.S. Conference of Mayors event, and every mayor I met was talking about that they want bike share, or they're putting in bike share, or what bike infrastructure that they were planning. It's really an exciting time. But a couple years, or just to quick give you a visual map of what it looks like here. So we've been doing some intense work in these 6 cities: Portland, San Francisco, Chicago, New York, Washington, and Memphis, where we, in the last 2 years, have seen significant progress in protected bike lanes, bike sharing systems, and bike infrastructure. We opened up this program and said, okay, we'll do 6 more cities, did an RFP process, and 102 cities wanted to be part of this deep dive program where for 2 years we developed out a lot of different bike infrastructure. We picked our 6 cities: Seattle, Denver, Indianapolis, Pittsburgh, Boston, and Atlanta, and also overlaying the 91 cities that have bike sharing across America. And it's really interesting, the people that applied for our program are also some unusual suspects: Lincoln, Nebraska, Little Rock, Arkansas, Stillwater, Oklahoma, Anchorage, Oklahoma City. I mean, it's not just the Portlands and the California cities anymore. It's definitely turning into more Midwestern cities and more mainstream America. The next big trend that we're seeing is a lot of mayors are talking about bicycling. They want to be popular in bike lanes, and bike share is popular. Rahm Emanuel has been leading that charge. He said you can't be for a startup, high-tech economy and not be pro-bike. And he was talking a lot of smack with the Seattle mayor about, he's like, I'm going to take all your high-tech jobs, I'm going to take all your bicyclists, we're getting them to move to Chicago. So it's been a fun banter going back between the Seattle mayor and the Chicago mayor. But it's not just blue mayors. We have in Indianapolis, Mayor Greg Ballard. He is quite the visionary. He's a Republican mayor in a red or pinkish state. And he has been doing incredible things for bicycling in Indianapolis. When he took over as mayor, he was like, we have 1 mile of bike lane. He's like, what's that? Where does it go? 1 mile to nowhere kind of thing. And so basically in the last 3 years, he's put in 75 miles of bike lanes. And by 2015, his goal is 200 miles of bike lanes and protected infrastructure. And he's seen what it's doing to revolutionize the city. He's saying, I'm the mayor of the city. What is my job? As far as I'm concerned, it's about talent attraction. It's about attracting business. And putting in bike lanes and trails is a big part of that. We're also seeing a major trend of open streets events and cyclovias. So cyclovias is basically when a city opens a street. A lot of times it's on a Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon. They remove cars and they turn it into a community festival with food and bicycling. And we've been seeing cyclovias go through the roof. The LA Open Streets event, the very last one, had 181,000 people bicycling on the streets of LA in that one day. Atlanta, their last cyclovia had 65,000 people. So we're seeing those all across the country. Another trend is that rural areas are using charity rides and mountain biking as an economic development tool. We're seeing a lot of urban pump parks going in, mountain bike parks, etc., and multi-day stage races, multi-day charity events with a lot of bicycling. We're also seeing that bicycling is a growing part of placemaking. When you think about the places where you want to vacation, where you want to spend time, where you want to linger, it's outdoor plazas, outdoor community areas. Bicycling is oftentimes a critical part of that mix. New York just came out with their study from, they put in a protected bike lane on 9th Street. And in a 9-block radius, their retail sales were up 47% in those 9 blocks of the protected bike lane in comparison to 3% from Manhattan retailers as a whole. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip through a couple of these, but these are just some sort of before and after sort of placemaking shots of protected bike lanes going in and after. But another trend I want to tell you about is unusual suspect coalitions. In Pennsylvania, like many states, transportation funding is broken. Our federal government, many of you know that by July or August, federal government will be bouncing checks on transportation infrastructure. The fundamental way that we fund transportation is broken, and that's basically the gas tax. And in Pennsylvania, they're suffering the same fate. They tried and they failed multiple times to increase the gas tax. And red state, Republican governor, and a broad coalition of traditional road gang, asphalt, general contractors, the traditional road and transportation types, teamed with the American Heart Association, the walking and bicycling groups, and another group called Mission Readiness, which is military folks that are really concerned about our nation's health and fitness. They're the ones that did that report a couple years ago called Too Fat to Fight, and they're really worried about making sure that the youth of America are physically fit. So this broad coalition came together. They failed in June. They doubled down, and last October in Pennsylvania were able to pass a gas tax. And we're seeing that bicycling and walking groups are getting much more active in those state coalitions. Finally, I wanted to tell you about a recent poll that we commissioned in New York. We worked with Transportation Alternatives, the lead local advocacy group there. And it was right after the New York City primary elections. And to find out what, basically the poll concluded overwhelmingly that voters wanted the next mayor and the city council to create more opportunities for people to walk, bike, and transit. It was really a refreshing poll. It was of 87% had voted in the last election, and like 92% were saying that they would vote in the upcoming election. And of those polled, 67% of voters, whether they owned a car or not, said that they support bike and ped infrastructure. 65% of males were supportive, 67% of females, and a whopping 78% of people under the age of 35 wanted more bike and ped infrastructure. 25% of New Yorkers ride a bike at least one time per month, so 1 in 4 people ride a bike. Also, clear majorities were in every age demographic. Voters who identified as Black or Hispanic were even likelier to support the measure. Transit riders showed strong support, with 72% of them wanted protected bike lanes and pedestrian islands. In terms of income brackets, the lowest income voters had the strongest support for bicycling and walking, but also 64% of people with incomes over $75,000 also supported it as well. When it breaks down partisan-wise, 63% of Republicans, 59% of independents supported, and 71% of Democrats. So 71% Democrats, 63 Republicans, and 59 for independents. The transportation secretary at the time, Jeanette Sedek-Khan, liked to joke, a lot of people would like to see their polling numbers as high as bike lanes. So that's basically it. I would encourage you, we would love to have you join People for Bikes. It's free, you can take out your iPhone and sign up. We'll send you great materials, great promotional stuff for bicycling in your backyard, and we'd love for you to be part of the movement. So that's a quick snapshot of the national landscape for bicycling. Thank you. I'm happy to answer a couple questions. Hi.
Do you bike to work in DC?
I actually live in Boulder, Colorado, and when I'm in DC I do bike share, but I bike to work all the time in Boulder. I'm in DC all the time. And we have lobbyists there too.
So you have a federal PAC,
Yep.
and you make federal contributions.
Yep.
Do you think your movement is focused more on federal level or local level?
We're actually kind of shifting because it's probably no secret in this room, Congress is not as functional as it used to be. And so we're shifting to some of these cities that are doing really exciting things for bicycling and kind of taking that momentum investing play out of the finance playbook. We're trying to go into cities and help amazing groups like San Francisco Bicycle Coalition or New York TA. So the way we distribute it is 40% of our work is federal government, 60% is trying to help cities be that much better for bicycling.
I have another question.
Sure. Yeah.
So in the organizational spectrum, there are local organizations that promote bicycling. What is your role with those local organizations? How do you interact?
Sure, we're a national group and we're also a funding organization. We put out a lot of grants to local advocacy groups and to national advocacy groups in the space. So our primary role over many years has been we fund really great ideas and really great initiatives locally. And then we also do a lot of federal lobbying, and that's kind of a new role for us as well. So. Anybody else? Go ahead.
So I love bike sharing, but in communities where this started to come up, it often gets packed.
Yeah.
Either as
we love that.
an amenity for tourists, which is good, or as an amenity for wealthy people because the bike sharing locations are in those kinds of spots.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of attacks on bike sharing. How do you go about defending against those attacks?
Yeah, that's great. And many of you might have seen the Jon Stewart, Stephen Colbert response to Wall Street Journal reporter Dorothy Rabanowitz. She just went nuts over City Bike when it first laid out in New York. And we loved it. It was like the gift that kept on giving. The guy who registered as bikelobby.com is some of the most hilarious tweets I've ever read in my life. And we just used it to funnel more people into it, because almost every single bike share has this trajectory of people being, there's a trajectory of right before bike share launches, the naysayers come out and people opine about how it's going to be the worst thing ever. And then it launches and it's wildly popular and very successful. And so we've seen that happen in dozens of cities. So we love it when we sort of have a dead body sort of adversary who hates bike sharing, because I really only know of a couple cities that it hasn't been extremely popular and successful. So it's something that we're ready for. We commissioned a bunch of Facebook profiles. Come on up. We did a bunch of Facebook profiles in New York, in Austin. It's about to roll out in Indianapolis. And it's everyday people, it's leaders, it's celebrities, it's people on bikes loving it. And we've been doing those profiles and pushing them out with some boosted ads and regular. And they've been a good thing to show people how popular and how everyday people ride bike share, not just enthusiasts. I'll turn it over to Leah.
Thanks, Jen.
Good work.
Good morning. My name is Leah Shaham. I'm the Executive Director of the San Francisco Bicycle Coalition. Thank you for caring about bicycling today. You are indeed part of a growing trend. You've heard some of the national statistics. I'm going to share a little bit of our insight and what we've experienced in San Francisco. And I want to say I'm very excited, just a little prelude, that Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom is here, and you're going to see some photos, images, and successes in San Francisco that he very much laid the groundwork for as mayor in San Francisco. And we hope that many other cities follow our lead in days to come, or years, many, many years to come. First, a little bit about us. We run both a 501c3 and a 501c4 organization. We've been around for 40 years, 41 years, who's counting. We do, with our C4, make endorsements for local candidates. A little bit on the state level, but mostly focus on local. And I'll talk about that later. That's unusual in the bike movement, but more and more are thinking about that. You're seeing more and more local and state groups get into the direct endorsing business. What we do on the very broadest level, though, as a nonprofit, is promoting bicycling for everyday transportation. Our goal is growing the number of people bicycling and improving bicycling overall. And we're feeling pretty good about how it's going. The trends that you've heard nationally are very much happening in San Francisco as well. This is a shot of Market Street in San Francisco, if you're familiar. Citywide, over these 6 years, biking increased 71%. On Market Street today, there are twice as many bicycles as cars every day on that street. It's a great kind of example of how the city's doing. And huge kudos, the green bike lanes you see here and the physical separation, those were all added in about 2010 under then Mayor Newsom's watch. And we are seeing these growing trends. Numbers are important, of course, but I want to highlight the types of people riding, the diversity of people riding. It wasn't that, well, it was pretty long ago. When I first started biking in San Francisco, about 18 years ago, it was a little bit lonely as a woman, I'll be honest. It was mostly these tough 22-year-old guys. We remember kind of the messenger culture in many of our cities. I guess it was cool, but it didn't necessarily welcome a lot of folks with open arms. And today, this really is a regular shot, just happens to be a lot of women riding. We see more and more women riding. We see more and more people at either ends of the age spectrum, folks that are older, folks that are younger, families. I say that's maybe the best part of my job as I ride into work every day, is I see at least 1 to 2 families per day. That's my anecdotal data, but literally it is not unusual like it used to be 10 or 20 years ago to see people biking in with their kids. And here's an example. This is actually Bike to School Day coming up in about a week, but in San Francisco we have the largest Bike to School Day that we know of in the nation. We now have 50 schools participating and 2,500 people on this day. We've seen biking to school, this is specifically biking, not including walking, grow by 4% in the last 6 years. That may not sound like a lot, but with a constituency as challenging as families can be, and for a city like San Francisco that really works hard to keep the city family friendly, we've been really excited and impressed by that. Let me pause for a second, a little bit more about us and the coalition. We're actually the largest nonprofit bicycle coalition at the local level in the country as well. We have just over 10,000 members now, and we're also one of the more active groups in the city. I think it's fair to say that we turn out more volunteers than most groups. I'm sure labor is definitely, in terms of contingents turning folks out, especially for elections, the strongest by far. But I would put the Bicycle Coalition right up there, right after that in terms of turnout. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in elections. But in general, our 10,000 plus members donate an average, and we track this, of 11,000 volunteer hours per year. That's everything from coming out to hearings, to writing letters, to being at events, etc. So I'm going to talk about why the numbers matter of people, but also the energy there matters. What we really focus on is making the city more amenable, safe and friendly for biking, and that's really our campaign called Connecting the City. What we found in polls is that 40% of San Francisco adults, it's just adults, say, I would like to bike, or I would like to bike more. Their number one challenge or impediment is feeling safe on the street. It's not the hills. People might immediately think, San Francisco, how can you bike there? And I'll be honest, I'm not a very strong rider. I avoid the hills. I go around, wherever I can, or I walk the bike up a couple of blocks if I need to. There's a lot of flat streets in San Francisco. People may be surprised. We found all of them as bicyclists. But what people say is, I want to bike more, but I'm nervous about the traffic. So what are we doing about that? We're building out the citywide bike network with more dedicated bike lanes. And they're worried about bike theft, as with any major city, theft is a problem. We're seeing tons and tons more bike parking, and I highlight this one. We have now about 40, I think, on-street bike parking corrals in the city. Each one of these is replacing, on average, 2 car parking spaces. Now, while our goal is not to replace the car parking spaces, it's pretty exciting to see that you can fit on average about a dozen bicycles there in the place that you used to be able to fit just 2 cars. So a great maximization of space. Different than Long Beach, and not to pick on you guys, but in our scenario up in San Francisco, both with these on-street bike parking corrals and what we call parklets, that extension of cafe space or restaurant space, we're not actually replacing the parking. If they can, they will, but that's not a requirement. Even despite that, so losing these parking spaces and adding bike parking or parklets, businesses are hankering for it. There is a backlog of probably 60 or 70 businesses right now saying, it needs to go through a city process, but city, come take away the car parking right in front and put the bike parking. It's not just cafes, it's not just bike shops, it's now all sorts of places. Clothes shops, banks, yoga studios, all sorts of places that are seeing that value. Bike access to transit is a major issue for us, regional transit. This is our BART regional system, and that's been an important one. Bike share, I want to credit then Mayor Newsom for bringing bike share. Well, came right after you left, I believe. It took a while, as things do in our city. But I think it was, I'll let you share, a trip to Lyon, France, I believe, where you were really inspired. And we were so excited to be, I think we are the first city in California that did finally bring bike share. We're a little bit behind DC and New York, but fantastic, successful program that's growing. And I want to share a shot. This is Mayor Newsom and other city leaders. I think this was 2007 in painting our city's first bike box. It was also the state's first bike box. This may not sound very exciting, but just to share the things we get excited about in the bike community. It's basically an advanced line on the street. You can't see very well here, but a place where bikes can queue up at the traffic light and then spring ahead or move ahead so that they're visible. And I want to give huge credit to our open streets. We call it Sunday Streets in San Francisco. We were indeed the first California city to launch this and worked very closely with Mayor Newsom, and it was amazing. It was a case where there was a lot of skepticism, fair to say, from the businesses. What do you mean you're going to close the street to cars? And that was the language, close the street to cars. You'll hear us very much use the words of open the streets to people. And a very busy and successful tourist area, probably the most busy and successful tourist area in San Francisco, was really worried because this event, Open Streets, on a Sunday morning would go right in front of their door, literally. And they said, oh, you're going to kill our business, it's going to be terrible. After one event, they were begging for it to come back. It now comes there twice a year, moves around different locations. The businesses love it. I think it's one of the best, I don't want to say unlikely, but new alliances that we as bicycle advocates have built with the business community locally, but we're bringing people to their front door. People stop and they buy things and they see things they've never seen. Notice, oh, it's a new cafe, it's a new bike shop, it's a new bookshop. We've also seen studies that San Francisco and other cities, people who walk, bike, and take transit spend more money on local business than people driving. People driving buy more at a time. They're buying larger quantities and look like they're spending more each time, but when you look over the span of a month, on average, folks taking sustainable modes of transportation are also actually spending more. So in short, San Franciscans love bicycling. I want to share a few numbers. The numbers of people biking are growing, as I shared, but even when we poll regular citizens, folks who aren't necessarily bicycling, we're seeing dramatic numbers. We as a nonprofit invest every other year in a professional poll. We hire David Binder, pollster up in San Francisco, to do an independent poll. And our 2013, this was in fall of 2013 poll, showed that 3/4 of San Francisco adults believe bicycling is good for San Francisco. 2/3 support adding physically separated bikeways. That's the bikeways with the physical separation from the car traffic. And 62% want to increase bike trips by at least 10 to 15% in the next 5 years. I think what we're seeing is, even for those who may not be getting the direct benefits, like myself who rides every day, folks are seeing the value in a more bike-friendly city. The same poll showed that the top number, 25% of San Franciscans bike more than once a week. So that's again, somebody like me who rides 5 days a week, or maybe it's just once a week. But even more interesting to me is that 7 in 10 ride a bike at some, what was the number here? That was, I think, over a month. 7 in 10 ride over a month. Now that might just be an afternoon in the park. It might be one trip over a month. But that's a vast majority are biking a little bit. And that's really our prospective audience. It's how do we encourage and help them bike more. A more updated number, we got more recent numbers literally yesterday, that 96% increase of biking in the city between these years. And why is this all important to you all? Whether you like bicycling or not, I would say that the bicycle community is indeed a growing community to watch in the political environment. Because people who bike, at least in my experience and working with other advocates in cities in particular, people who bike vote. And they care a lot about what those candidates and what different referendums are doing for their ride. And I don't want to sound selfish. A lot of us are involved with advocacy and bike because we understand the benefits to a better city. Don't need to tell you about the environmental, the health, the density and local economic boons we talked about. But in the end, most people vote for what they see as their self-interest, right? Is this going to be good for me and my family in the long run? We know that. People connect very much to their everyday commute to work, much more, frankly, than transit riders, than people who drive or people who walk. There's not necessarily a community or an identity. For whatever reason, there's a very strong identity among people who bicycle. And I'm just going to share a little bit about how we make the most of that in our community. This is last year's Bike to Work Day with our now Mayor, Ed Lee. I can't tell you the turnout we see on our annual Bike to Work Day from just regular folks. We religiously get 9 or 10, 11 of the members of our board of supervisors, most of the major directors, department directors, et cetera, to come out and bike. And I think now actually between Mayor Lee now in, Mayor Newsom before 8 years, Mayor Brown, Willie Brown 8 years before that, every single year on annual Bike to Work Day coming up in May, we have ridden with the mayor of San Francisco. It is not an event they want to miss, which is a great thing. And why is that? Partly we know they understand the benefits, again, to the environment, to health, to livability, to affordability, to access. But in the end, it's because they're hearing from us. We are very vocal. People in the bike community, they know what matters to their, again, an everyday ride. This is just an image. There was a real problem at this intersection. We geared up in literally overnight. We put out an email. We're also very connected, frankly, online, social media. We put out an email at maybe 4 or 5 p.m. one day, and had 100 people turn out the next morning for a rally. This intersection is now fixed. It's not perfect, but it's tremendously safer to be walking and biking through. There was a threat, though, that this bike lane was going to be pulled out. Again, what drives, ironically, what drives people? What pedals people? It is a lot of their own interest, right? It really is thinking about, what do I need in my life? I want to be able to get to work safely. So we've really taken this strong identity and community and turned it into a powerful voting bloc in San Francisco, what we call Bike the Vote. This is from 2 years ago, our most recent, about a year and a half ago, our most recent mayoral election. We do endorsements, like I mentioned. So because our city also does ranked choice voting, we also do ranked choice endorsements. So you'll see here our 3 choices last cycle for mayor. We also endorsed in a measure, Proposition B was a major funding measure, exciting measure to increase street repaving. Not the sexiest thing in the world, right? But all of a sudden you've got literally hundreds of volunteers out there saying, this is life and death to me. How smooth the streets are really matters to me. And we just barely got the 2/3 needed to pass this, and we're really proud now that we have funding to repave our streets. One of the great things about bicyclists too is that we're so visible, right? We're not sealed away in our box of whether it's a bus or a train or a car. We're really out there on the street. People see each other, they identify. We can catch you, we know where you're riding. We set up this tent, we give out our flyers. This is an example of this past election about a year and a half ago. And again, folks stop, they want to know, what do you guys think about this race? We turn people out for phone banking. The passion, phone banking is the hardest thing to get somebody to do, right? You think door knocking's hard? Phone banking, no, please. We turn out 20, 30 people for our candidates. We have bike night. It's literally called bike night. We do special valet bike parking outside. We bring lots of good food, as you can imagine. And we talk to people in a language that they care about. Safety. It's for everyone. It's for you. Really thinking about, how is this going to help your commute, your life, literally. So I'm really proud that we worked on all of these campaigns this past year. Obviously, out of top 3, we did get 1 elected. It was number 3, and we're proud of that. He wasn't our top 3. I want to also share that the campaigns are now embracing the identity of bicyclists. And that's a big switch from 10 or 20 years ago. It used to be a little bit of the other, right? Oh, those crazy people, they're messengers, they have purple hair, they're all like angry 18-year-old guys. Well, they're not. This is my board president of the San Francisco Bicycle Coalition and her daughter. And the folks for Prop B, for that streets repaving measure, came to us and said, can you guys help us put a flyer out? So this was their mailer, not ours, we didn't pay for it, their mailer that they then embraced the bicycling agenda. I want to show you some others. David Chu, one of the candidates running for mayor back then, and this is his piece. We didn't twist his arm for this. He went out and did one of his pieces about Market Street and biking. Ditto, another piece. He said, hey, can you I want to know some bike families. I want to do some pieces around biking. Another one, you'll see the bike network front and center there. I should mention, he does bicycle every day. He is really walking the walk and pedaling the pedal, so this is not just a show. Eric Moore, one of our local supervisors, you'll see a little bit of the highlight there, but really showcasing the Bicycle Coalition's endorsement of him in his local race. And Mayor Lee, who did win the race, hard to see, but the very top left corner, you'll see a shot of him and a few of us riding on Bike to Work Day. So great to see that a candidate who, wasn't traditionally necessarily embracing biking, wasn't somebody we'd had a long relationship with, frankly, really embraced it through this campaign because he saw the power of that voting block. And we're not shy about it. Our logo is, I vote my bike the vote. It's not all we do. I'd say our time as an organization, it's maybe 4 or 5% of our overall work. But that 4 or 5% has dividends throughout the year in terms of course, our influence and getting the ear of our local politicians and really being seen as an influence in our city. So I will pause there and open up to questions. Or actually, I feel like I probably went a little longer than I needed to, and I'm going to go ahead and, if I can, just move right in to introduction. Am I introducing? Oh, you are? Great. Okay, I'm going to introduce that.
A couple of house cleaning items, and that is, does everybody see this bicycle up here? It is for raffle. So if you send your business cards to the center of the aisle, we'll pick those up and we're going to raffle this off. Now the catch is that you have to pay for the shipping if you're on the other side of the country. But I will take care of that. I'm going to ask the Lieutenant Governor at the end to draw for the raffle. Also, thank you to the San Diego Association of Realtors and National Association of Realtors for sponsoring this session. And thank you everybody for coming. To the gentleman's question about bike share for San Diego, they're my clients. I'm glad to talk to anybody about that. But basically what we did was over 100 meetings, community outreach, organized meetings, emails, letters, and engagement to share how bike share is a new mode of transportation. New York was very successful in the sense of saying that this is the first new transportation system in 100 years since the subway. We present that to the beach towns, the other parts of towns where the bike share is going, and we can talk about the economic impact. And it's not about taking away cars, but it's about putting in bikes and people that are going to be coming and going regularly during the course of the day, increasing business and the economy. So I just want to answer that question. And from what we heard from Charlie, Leah, and Jen is about on national scales and the state scale. And in San Diego, we have taken a lot of those little snippets and used those accordingly to the respective elections that have been going on in the past couple of years. Now, some of you are familiar with the fact that we've had about 3 mayoral elections in the past 2 years. But what has been great is that there have been voters lurking, bike voters, the urban cyclists lurking among those groups, and the candidates and the candidates for mayor and for city council have taken on to the fact that there is this new realm of voter. Now you guys are familiar with the terms of NASCAR dads and soccer moms. Well, now we have the urban cyclist, as Leo was talking about, or we call them the velo voter. And so let me see by a show of hands how many voters are in here. All right, and Matt, you got to raise your hand for this one. Let's see how many cyclists, casual, daily, roadies. Okay, so we have this great demographic, and we've seen the same thing in a wide, diverse demographic in San Diego from these organized groups coming out and the candidates soliciting their vote on a multitude of levels. And what we've also been able to do is work with the organizations, the coalitions, the advocacy groups, and the different groups of voters to have them come out and support respective candidates so we can talk about the things that are important. As mentioned, infrastructure, safe routes to schools, open street celebrations where you move the cars out for a day and you're able to walk, shop, stroll, dine. We did one here this last Sunday and we had 15,000 people, no cars on the streets for 2 miles. Businesses go up 50 to 200% on that single day. They love it. In Los Angeles, as mentioned, they're going to move towards doing that on a monthly basis. Now, what does that mean? As the picture showed, there's voters, just as the same group of diverse voters that we have here. The bike voter is lurking among us, and we can organize them and bring them out for the respective candidates. So, as what what we've experienced is the bike coalitions came out during the 2 mayoral elections ago and had a questionnaire and said, will you fill this out? We want to know where you stand on infrastructure, safe routes, safe passage, and how you're going to spend city money and allocate it towards all these things that are important to us as homeowners, as parents, as business owners, so people come and go to our respective places, or we're able to connect. And so once that was done, I was able to join that coalition and say, let's make it bigger and better. Let's have a little bit more transparency. That being that rather than just take the questionnaire, let's do a speaker series and have candidates come out and speak to us. And so then the candidates are like, wait, yeah, we'll come out and we'll talk to you, and then we're able to get them on record. But it's also a platform that's adding to the standard and respect. Any San Diegans here? Oh, I see a couple of you. Okay. So the mayoral races, the issues have been Qualcomm Stadium, Convention Center. Okay, so and then it switched towards this last election towards neighborhoods first. So what does that mean? It's parents wanting to have a home value, wanting to protect their children, have a nice place, a nice yard, and to have that connectivity and that feel that neighborhood as their own. So that shifted a little bit. We saw a physical presence with candidate Alvarez saying, well, I'm going to go out there and physically, and you can come. There was a bike fundraiser. And so the local business was there, the advocates were there, a diverse group of socioeconomic. There were rich people, there were poor people, there were people, community worker, people that work for the community organizations. There were people that worked for the city that joined that campaign and rode around the neighborhood to see what was so he could listen to what was important to them, and they could share that on a one-on-one basis in a very transparent environment. So then, should he win, you're able to take that, you have that connection and that transparency. Secondly, so since he had a physical presence, candidate Faulkner went more in the cerebral route. Let's do an op-ed. Let me connect with the leadership one-on-one and have a discussion with them so we have a real intimate exchange. And the groups, the advocates, the organizations were in that position where they're basically able to hedge their bets from both sides. So they have that dialogue and that conversation. And what we see in my experience, I've been involved in politics, I've been involved in a lot of community operations, is that for candidates, for your clients, this is a niche that they can work with and take forward that's going to connect with the community in a far more substantive way than your standard stump speeches between the stadiums, convention centers, et cetera, because of the economic value, because of the property value, neighborhood value, and those values that they take to heart as they make that city their own. So, and the big thing for San Diego has been a discussion about alternative energy, sustainable energy, and alternative means of transportation. We have the only electric car share program in the country. We have bike share coming like many cities. And just a note, if anybody's from Chattanooga, Tennessee, you have 30 bike share stations in your city. I'm very proud of that. It's exciting to see from the big cities to the small cities getting on, and as Jen mentioned, 90 by the end of this year. So the economic value in Chattanooga to San Diego to New York to Chicago, et cetera, and Florida are really taking keen to that. So we know the voters are out there, and we know that they can be organized on multiple levels, and it's finding the nuances. So it's an exciting time, it's a valuable time, because then we are able to continue to work with those candidates for a bigger and better platform and for the service that they're able to provide to the city. And so we have the data-minded folks that are here, some of you guys, some of the grassroots, and also from an organizing perspective. And these, the purpose again is the nuggets that we can provide and share with you that's happening in San Francisco, Long Beach, San Francisco, from the leadership of the Lieutenant Governor and others across the country, your clients that can take this a step further. And so with that, I'd like to introduce the gentleman who has that real world, real time experience and is going to share some of thoughts and some of his time as mayor. I give to you the Lieutenant Governor, Gavin Newsom.
All right, I'm cognizant of the time, so I'll try to be as brief as possible. And I got to say, I was listening to three of you, Charlie, and Jen, and Leah. I mean, there's real power in their voice, real passion and conviction, and it brings me back. You know, you get up to the state level, you get a little far removed from what's really happening on the ground, and what's happening that matters is really happening in cities all across, not only our state, all across the nation. And I'm a true believer of this old adage that if you don't like the way the world looks when you're standing up, stand on your head and go local. Remarkable things are happening at the local level. And one thing I know, and one thing everybody that's ever served in the capacity of mayor learns to understand quickly, is that mayors make lousy ideologues, and ideologues make terrible mayors. There's a hard-headed pragmatism to governing in a city. Decision-making, good and bad, day in and day out. And that connective tissue, that connectivity to your constituency, that feedback loop, the two-way conversation that we're having every single day, in so many ways is the success that you saw exampled by those three presentations. But that was not always the case. And here's my point of view. It wasn't that long ago where people like Leah scared the hell out of us and pissed us off. I served as a county board of supervisors member under then Mayor Willie Brown, a legend. For those of you who don't know him, a legend in California politics, dominant voice in California, Speaker of the Assembly, became mayor of San Francisco. And the Bike Coalition and the mayor weren't particularly friendly towards one another. The mayor, as a candidate, was elected despite their strong advocacy of opposition. He got into office and there was a lot of friction. I was serving there as the county supervisors, witnessing all of this. Glad I wasn't in the middle of it, trying to navigate it. And the intensity came in many ways. We were just then debating where to site a few bike lanes. It became a defining line between whether or not you're pro-business or you're anti-business. Business community almost unanimously opposing every single bike lane that was put up. You're going to destroy our businesses. They came out in force, and then this counter and prevailing force started to form and function in a much more organized manner. They were able to always convince, despite the mayor's opposition, a majority of our county supervisors, the 6 of the 11, and they started to have some victories. So much so, they felt more and more emboldened and became more and more organized, not just as bike advocates, but connecting to other environmental causes and to other political organizations. Power, real power, coming from connectiveness. And became a bigger and bigger force and a bigger and bigger thorn in the side of Willie Brown. So much so that his reelection was in peril because of those folks, because of that advocacy, and because of their organizing principle. At the time, there was something else raging related to the bike community, and that was something called critical mass. My God. All of these folks out there on their bikes, picking, of course, the commute times. Right then on Friday, was it the third Friday of every month, poor folks trying to get home, couldn't get home because thousands of these bicyclists would come together, self-organizing communities, no leaders, just hundreds of thousands of leaders, not one leader. And Willie Brown had to answer the question of what the hell are you doing, Mayor? I couldn't get home last night. It took me 2 hours. They were stopping the intersections. This is an outrage. It's anarchy in the streets. Why should we re-elect you? And Mayor Brown made a terrible mistake. He said, I'm going to clamp down on this lawlessness. I'm going to get aggressive going after these folks. Of course, at the time, we didn't realize how leaderless it was. We didn't realize there was no sort of centralizing individual. There was centralizing thesis. But we couldn't call Leah to tell everyone to stop, or to at least be sensitive to the mom who had to pick up her kid after school or childcare or something. And as a consequence of that, the bike movement just took off in reaction to the anarchy or the dictatorial nature of this politician that is not listening to the people. As a consequence of that, Willie Brown struggled, even Willie, to get reelected, had a write-in candidate that they all supported, a guy named Tom Amiano, and it was stretched out in this remarkable campaign that If you haven't seen the documentary, it's worthy as political folks of watching this documentary to understand the whitewaters of the change. We were going from something old to something new. They weren't particularly friendly to the next mayor either. I unfortunately was appointed by Willie Brown, so I was an appendage of the status quo and struggled to convince them that as an environmentalist, as someone who's grown up in the city, I cared passionately about these issues, but they weren't so convinced. And back then there wasn't ranked choice voting, and even if there was, I wouldn't have been number 3. And they had all kinds of other suitors, and despite their opposition, somehow I won the election of mayor, even though every bicyclist had a sign of my opponent, Matt Gonzalez, and the bike coalition was everywhere making sure that I didn't get in. But despite all that, I learned to truly admire their advocacy and their sense of purpose and purposefulness. So much so that I decided to appoint Leah to stop complaining and criticizing and make her part of the problem, and put her on our Metropolitan Transportation Authority, where we were in the process of updating our bike plan, which I supported. And over the course of demonstrating, not rhetorical, but demonstrating true commitment, we, I think, began to convert a lot of people in the sincerity of our desires. But the backdrop of that, and I'll try to close, was my competitiveness, candidly. Because if you know a little bit about my politics, I'm very intense when it comes to environmental stewardship. And had the most aggressive green building standards in the nation, most aggressive solar program in the country, requiring alternative fuels, all our taxi cabs. We were first to ban plastic bags, plastic water bottles. I was out there in Lyon, France, and saw the program, what really began the bike sharing movement around the world, and said I want to bring it back to San Francisco, and came back to Paris a year later and saw the Believe program, which really popularized the bike share. But I said I want to bring these things back, all in an effort to become the dominant voice in environmental stewardship of all the cities in the country. And every damn year, unfortunately, we always fell short of that mark. They would come out with the annual rankings, and San Francisco was always number 2 in environmental stewardship, despite just leading in every other capacity. But 1, bikes. We weren't doing enough. The bike share program, we were going to be the first in the nation to do it. I had a city attorney say, well, you can't do it. There's liability. Folks get on these bikes, city is sponsoring them, someone falls over, they're going to sue the city. Folks say you got to have put helmets on. And everyone says, well, I'm not going to share someone else's helmet. And then people say, well, how do you pay for it? They say, well, we can pay for it by doing big billboards and advertising, and we'll happily pay for the bikes. People are like, no, no, billboards. I don't commercialize it. And so we struggled through all those things, and then somehow, I don't know how the hell they did it in D.C., they put it in, and it sort of created more fervor and energy, and eventually, as Leah said, it took about a damn decade, even though we kind of popularized it. We were at the U.S. Conference of Mayors saying we're going to, we're seeing these things take shape, and all those objections overturned. But here's my long-winded point. The reason we were always second was not just because we did not reach our potential on bikes, it's because we couldn't. It's not because we didn't want to. We were sued. Only in California could you be sued in advancing a principle of getting people out of their cars and increasing their health and air quality under an environmental regulation. We were sued under, well known in California, CEQA. The environmental law that was there to protect the environment was actually used against the expansion of our bike plan. We literally, was illegal, could not paint or stripe our streets. We couldn't put these shallows, these sharing lanes, couldn't do any of these things. We were completely stopped in all of these endeavors. It's a stunning thing to think of an environmental law being used against you because one guy said it was going to infringe upon his ability to park. I don't know what the hell the argument was at the time, but it took years and years. We eventually prevailed. So I always tell my environmental friends, don't tell me how perfect CEQA is, because it is abused even against the interests of which it was supposed to align. But nonetheless, having gotten that behind us, we then, with intensity, were able to move forward. We had laid out, your organization had laid out a strategic plan, and we hit the ground running and started doing things at a force and rate and speed that were truly remarkable. And now we can lay claim, San Francisco, though I'm not there. of being the most environmentally sustainable big city in the United States of America, which I'm just, as a guy who grew up there, very, very proud. So that's my thoughts, that we've come a long way. And this ain't all easy. But there's no doubt the political acumen, the political influence and force these bike coalitions and their organized capacity are serious and significant. And I will say, I mean this, I'm not just patronizing, Leah's just truly one of the best and the brightest in that movement. And I would pay attention to her as consultants. I mean that. They move the needle. They've had a huge impact, and it's good for all of us. And it's a wonderful thing to see hearts and minds change. Final point, because I just can't help it. Whoever, when you're mayor, you're just going to get the grief, right? No matter what the hell happens. When we did the Sunday streets, when we started shutting down the streets, she referenced some of the opposition, but it was, for those of you who visited San Francisco, it was Pier 39, Fisherman's Wharf folks that wanted to take our heads off. How dare we shut down the streets right in front of them? And they fought us tooth and nail. And we put that first Sunday streets, and people were, I mean, all over the Bay Area, Oakland, East Bay, South Bay, people came out, and we had all kinds of events. You know, people were, and we had some guy who was, you know, believed in hula hoops and came out with 50 hula hoops, and all these kids are at hula hoops. They had free bikes that were being out there, roller skates. I mean, it was just a magnificent, magnificent day. So much so that now every neighborhood in San Francisco wants to shut down their streets. Every business organization is encouraging to see more of it. And it's a great thing. Those parklets, same thing. I think we were one of the first cities in the country, not just in California, to do them. And Leah mentioned there's a huge line of folks. I'm a restaurateur, and I'm just upset that folks across the street did it before we did it. It's become a phenomenon. Quality of life, you know that. In a world that's dominantly becoming urbanized, it's all about quality of life, and all of these things are principles of that ideal. And again, I'm just grateful for their advocacy and their intense passion for not just bicycling, cyclists, but for healthy, vibrant, sustainable communities. Thank you.
So I hope we convinced you to sell your house, move to California, and get on a bike. If you haven't gotten a business card up into this basket yet, let's do so now. Last call.
Fun part. Anybody else?
One guy wanted to put 500 cards.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, you game the system. This is not ranked choice, is it? No.
Do they have to promise to share the photo of them riding on social media later, maybe?
That's a great
Keep the
idea.
love going?
I'm going to mix it up so there's no. And none of you have, you know, the key is always fold in these things. Fold your card because then it appears high. Just saying for the future.
I'm a California voter, Gavin.
All right, last name, sir? Yeah. All right, I'm not, honestly not looking. Here we go. And the winner is, look at that, Judy Burns. Statement. Well done, Judy. By the way, if I may, I'm a little sensitive about this, and you'll understand in a moment. You know, we got a little inferiority thing going on with Rick Perry. Coming in case, unfortunately, our winner is from the great state of Texas. So I just.
It's a big bike city these days.
Well done, well done. No, we love Texas. It's all yours.
Feel free to ask any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. No, thank you. Thank you. That's awesome.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Oh, that's true. That's true.
I'm focused on environmental. We just get it with the government earlier.
Really did, because I just.
Oh,